I gained my love of science growing up. My grandfather was a noted astronomer, and both my parents have got PhDs in psychology. I learned what made a good scientific study when I was a teenager. My dad used to tell stories around the dinner table of helping students with getting their statistics right, and my mum used to lecture in experimental design. That love of science has stood me in good stead. I've at least skim-read hundreds of studies and books on the subject of depression and mental health. In fact, when something new comes out on the subject, I get really excited to read it. I'm very lucky and blessed to have these skills and that ability to understand the science around this condition. Without following the science, I don't believe that I would have been able to crack the problem and to understand the enigma that was my mental health issue. The purist in me only wants to bring you solutions that have what I would describe as good scientific evidence for them. For those of you that share my love of science, that means things that have had a study done on them that is repeatable, placebo-controlled, heterogeneous, double-blind, and properly randomized. If those terms don't mean anything to you and you're interested to learn more, the best book that explains that in very simple terms is Ben Goldacre's Bad Science, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. Most of my recovery came from following the scientific evidence. I don't believe I would be well without having done that. Unfortunately, when I review the history of all of the various different things that I have tried over the years, I know that some of those things don't have that level of evidence for them. As a scientist, my toes curl at the thought of including any of that in this channel. However, I've realized on reflection that I can't bring you all of my knowledge and everything that I've learned on this subject without covering some of those things as well. For me, depression was a tricky and pervasive illness. The real world is messy, and not all of the solutions out there have had the level of research done on them that I would like. Having toured our evidence-based health system and having got really good results out of it, I realized I wasn't able to get to the point where I was living a virtually depression-free life without adding some of those other things in on top. And while I'm not in any way a conspiracy theorist, I have noticed that there does seem to be a tendency towards putting more money and more funding into studies where the outcome is a patentable pharmaceutical drug. Now, I've nothing against those, and in fact some of them are great, and I'll talk about them in other videos. But I do think that there isn't as much evidence around some of the other things that I've come to believe are also vitally important, like exercise, social contact, supplements, and a variety of other things that I've used to great effect. My goal with these videos is to provide the knowledge that I've built up over the years. What I don't want to do is mislead you into thinking that something has more or less evidence than it actually has. I'm going to provide you a range of alternatives, and it's up to you to choose what you want to do in discussion with your own doctor. After all, even if something has got good scientific evidence for it and it's worked for me, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be right for you. In order to help you make your own decisions, I've graded all of the videos on this channel by the level of evidence. There are two main levels that I'm going to use: scientific evidence and compelling anecdotal evidence. Let me talk about what I mean by both of those. The scientific evidence label means that I'm satisfied that there's a level of scientific evidence available for a given treatment. I'll try and break down that level of evidence, for example, by stating whether it's good or preliminary. Not all treatments in this category may be in mainstream use everywhere, but there will be at least some well-designed studies that back up a particular approach before I'm willing to consider including it in this category. That often includes things that get used in at least some of the health systems in the Western world. If there's been particularly good evidence, I'll aim to mention it. For example, if the research has been reviewed by someone like the Cochrane collaboration, we can be about as sure as we're going to be that the research has been well conducted. I'm not going to go into too much more detail other than just giving these broad categories of evidence. However, if you want to read further, you should be able to find studies on anything that I've included in this category if you do a search. The majority of the content in this channel is going to fit into the category of good scientific evidence. The compelling anecdotal label means that I'm personally compelled that this is something that's worth trying or knowing about. The bar to get into this category is as high as I can make it. It needs to be something that I've read about, heard numerous case studies on, and at least tried on myself and a few other people around me. It also needs to be obvious to me, given everything that I've learned and that I've tried, that it fits with what I understand and therefore makes good sense. In some cases, some of the things here have been so profoundly useful that they've gone on to change the lives of myself and others around me over and over again. Now, the standard for me to include something here is really high. I'm a skeptic first and foremost, and I need a lot to get over the line. If I do include something in this category, I'll briefly mention why I included it. The vast majority of things that I've come across do not make the cut for compelling anecdotal. You won't find homeopathy or magnesium oxide or a juice diet on here. That's because I'm not remotely compelled that any of these things is better than a placebo or sugar pill. For more on that subject, see the video on running experiment on yourself safely and effectively. However, in some cases, like the great work that's getting started on the microbiome or the wonderful work by Dr. Amen on subtypes for depression, it's clear to me that whilst there is still a lot of research to be done, these are things that can contribute, in my experience, to an understanding and treatment of depression, and so in my view, it's worth your knowing about them. Now, what that doesn't make them is scientifically proven. Compelling anecdotal is really only my opinion. And as careful as I have been and as confident as I am on that opinion, the nature of science is that both doctors and patients, no matter how careful, can accidentally deceive themselves from time to time. I discuss a bit more about that in some of the other videos and in the video on running experiments on yourself. But believe it or not, that without a proper study, you can never truly know for sure if something actually works, even if you think it makes you better. If and when I'm able to afford it, I would love to fund some large-scale, well-designed studies on some of the ideas that I've put down as compelling anecdotal, and maybe even some of them that have moderate scientific evidence as well. Some of them have been such game changers that I'd love to see if they can stand up to proper scrutiny. I'm willing to bet that most of them will, and perhaps I'll be wrong in one or two cases. That's okay, it's not like one solution worked for everybody anyway, whether it's been scientifically proven or not. At the end of the day, I'm going to present you with these things that I think are worth your knowing about and considering, because they either fit with my understanding and I've tried them, or because they have good scientific evidence and also fit with that understanding. What you do and what you choose to do is up to you. You can decide what you're comfortable with. So look for those labels across all of my videos. And just a reminder, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not scientifically qualified. So before making any change in your treatment plan or starting a new treatment, please get medical advice from a doctor or another professional. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next video.